Our governor signed a couple of bills, and Phil, if you could just say a few words about them, I would appreciate it. Phil Mock is with the State's Attorney's Office.
The two bills he's talking about, you guys probably heard. One's called the red flag law, and the other one is the amendment for how long you have to wait before you deliver a firearm when you sell one. Neither one of these laws go into effect till January 1st, so everything's the status quo till January 1st. But the main thing you need to know is under the unlawful sale or delivery of firearms statute, it used to be you had to wait 72 hours for a concealable firearm, which everybody identified as a handgun. It used to be 24 hours for a long arm. Well, he changed the law, and it's 72 hours for all long arms and all handguns or concealable guns. There is one exception that they didn't change, and I didn't even know this was in the act. If you go to buy a stun gun or a taser, they're supposed to make you wait 24 hours before you pick that up. That stayed the same. The law did something else that doesn't really affect us, but it affects gun laws. They eliminated the no wait for sale of firearms to a non-resident at a firearm showing or display recognized by the Department of State Police. And where that used to occur a lot was down at Sparta at the trap range. If you were, say, from Texas and you wanted to buy a gun while you were there, you didn't have to wait the time frame because it was recognized by the state police that that was that type of facility and event. That won't occur anymore. So they're impacting our dealers' ability to sell to out of state at those things, because who's going to want to wait 3 days to pick it up unless you know at the very beginning and you're still going to be there? So I just, you know, it doesn't really affect us. We all live here and it doesn't apply to us, but I wanted you to know it. The more particularized law, the red flag law, that is what they call it, I wanted to give you a little more information on. It is, first of all, Illinois already had a similar law that nobody uses, where you could petition the court if you thought somebody was dangerous to have their guns taken away. It's been on the books for 30 years. Nobody ever used it. But the anti-gunners have these new red flag laws, and instead of amending the one we have, because I don't even think they realized it was there, they set up a new statute. It's going to fall in the statutes, right? You know, the FOIA statute comes at Chapter 430, Section 65, concealed carry 66. This one's going to be numbered 67, and it's basically a statute that allows certain people to petition the court to take your firearm rights away from you. And only certain people can do it. So that means the Moms Against Guns can't just like name all of us and try to take them away. You either have to be a family member to be a petitioner, which means a spouse, parent, child, stepchild, or other person related by blood or marriage, or a person who lives with you. Or you have to be an intimate partner, meaning a spouse, former spouse, not that anybody in a divorce would ever want revenge on you, a person with whom you had a child in common, and that doesn't mean you could be adopted or natural born, or a person who has had a dating or engagement relationship, and they don't define that. So if you date somebody once and they're mad at you, and it doesn't say like how recent the dating has to be, they you know, 5 years later they can get mad at you. Or a law enforcement officer. These are the bad, you know, these are the groups that can do it. But and even though a lot of people doesn't like this law, there's some real good stuff in the law, because it was watered down from what they originally talked about. One of the main things you got to realize is they made it stronger than I told you about. There was that old law out there. They made it stronger. you have to have clear and convincing evidence that the person's a danger to himself or others. And under the continuum of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is like the highest level you use that in criminal cases. Clear and convincing is right under it. Preponderance of evidence is like a normal standard in a lawsuit. Probable cause is under that. Reasonable suspicions under that. So they did say the person going against you has to have clear and convincing evidence you're a danger to them or somebody else, or yourself. One of the other good things is if they are caught that they're lying in this petition, and all the petitions have to be sworn to, right in the statute it says it is perjury punishable as a Class 2 felony. So there's a deterrent built into it that people shouldn't use this just for revenge, or shouldn't use it to harass you, because they got some problems if they get caught that they lied over the whole thing. How it works is there's two mechanisms. One is an emergency order, and they can do that without notice to you. Ex parte, that means they can just go before a judge. There's an attempt to try to get you in court.
Is it like a FISA?
No, totally unrelated. But they can do that, and if they do that, the judge issues the order, and in their application they have to do more than just say you're a harm to yourself or others. They're also supposed to tell the court if they know you have firearms, where they know you have them. And the reason for that is, say your adult son is threatening suicide, and you know he's got a shotgun because you know he hunts and you know he keeps it in his house. You would go to the court and say, my son, for whatever the facts are, you got to have facts, said, I'm so depressed, I can't live any longer, my girlfriend dumped me, I'm going to kill myself, and I think he really means it, and I've known him his whole life because I'm his mom or dad, and oh, by the way, he has a shotgun, he's got like a Remington shotgun, because you're supposed to say the make if you know it, or type of weapon, and you're supposed to say where it's located. What the law says is if the judge grants that, not only does he grant it, but the police, when they receive it, can use that information. If there is probable cause that a weapon is where they think it's going to be, they can get a search warrant to go take the weapon. That's something that the other laws never had. They'd knock on your door and say, do you have any weapons, you want to turn them over? But this says you can get a search warrant and take the weapon. But again, it's still got to be on probable cause. And I wrote enough search warrants over the year for police. You can't just say, I know Willie's a drug dealer and he keeps them at his house because where else would he keep them? You know, it works that way with guns. You can't say, well, of course the guns are at his house. Where else would he keep them? To have probable cause, you got to say, I saw they were there. He told me they were there. I gave him a gift of one at that location. And there's got to be some timeliness criteria, but that's in the statute. There's also provisions, though, that you get served with it. They'll go to your house to search to get your guns, and they'll give you a copy of the order. You can petition the court, and the court's supposed to have a hearing within 14 days for you to present your side. And when you present your side, if you wanted to get this vacated, only have to prove your case by that lower preponderance of the evidence. So to take your rights away from you is a higher burden of proof than for you to get them back. So that's why I said there are some good things they put in it. The second kind of taking is you go the exact same rules, except you go right in there up front and say, I want to take away their guns for 6 months. I don't need this emergency immediate thing, but I want to take them for 6 months for whatever these reasons are. On both of these laws, they allow the respondent, the person who they're taking their guns away, only has one opportunity during those time periods to petition to say this is wrong and I want this vacated. So you got to be careful if you're under that you only get one bite at that apple in that period. So if it's a 6-month order and you want to, maybe you are a little depressed and maybe you don't really care, but all of a sudden hunting season's coming up 2 months later and you'd like to get your shotgun back, you can petition it in that little passage of time. You could bring a psychiatrist or whoever wanted as your proof to say he's fine, he doesn't have problems. And you could do that, but it specifically says you only get once during that time period. Another weird thing about the statute is, even though it's a 6-month period, they can move to renew it forever, but every time they move to renew it, it's only for 6 months. They can only move to renew it within the last 3 months of that 6 months. And every time they renew it, you get another bite at your apple to say, I want my one hearing to get my rights back. The weapons that are being taken away, law enforcement seizes them. However, there's a provision that if you have somebody that will keep them for safekeeping for you, and as long as the petitioner gets either notice, or if they're there and it's at the hearing and you say, my cousin will keep them for me, the court is supposed to award them to the cousin as long as the cousin would say, I swear, Judge, that I will not give it to him. They affirmatively have to make a statement and swear that they're not going to give it to the person that's getting them taken away from, but it doesn't go to the police. So that's sort of a change in the law that's beneficial compared to what was proposed before. The other change that's beneficial is, from what was originally proposed, is they don't revoke your gun card, they do not revoke your concealed carry card, they are suspended. Here's the difference. If they revoked them, you would have to reapply from square one. By being suspended, when the time period's up, you automatically get it back. And the statute even says it. Time's up, police automatically give you your guns back. You don't have to jump through hoops to get a court order. Now, you're going to get some departments, if it was in Chicago, they'd probably refuse to give them to you. But you can get a court order and you can get penalties against them for violating that court order because it's not supposed to need a new act. It's automatic. They built that into it as another safeguard. But that's basically what the law is. And it's still going to have some stuff worked out between now and then, because the Department of State Police has to make some certain regulations, because there's all these record-keeping requirements for the local law enforcement. They're supposed to every day tell the Department of State Police every person that they had one of these either granted or rescinded. So there's always a current list of everybody. There's certain reporting requirements that they got to work out, like the clerks of the court are, in an emergency, have to notify the notify the police by the next day, which that may sound like it's normal, but in a lot of counties it may take a week to get certain things to the sheriff from the clerk's office. If somebody's trying to evict you from your home, they get that court order and the clerk's told to give it to them, it may take a week before they get it. They specifically put in here it's a one-dayer. But that's basically what the statute says. There is again, it doesn't go into effect till January 1, and there will be some rules and regulations worked out between the local law enforcement and the sheriff between now and then, which could tweak this a little bit, but I'm just going off the words of the statute. And the other thing that statute did, besides it's going to have its own provision because it's a new law, they also amended the firearm owner's identification card statute, the 430-65 statute, to add that if you have a firearms restraining order, they talk about you can't actively apply for one if you don't have one during that time period. So if you don't have a FOID or your FOID expired and you want to get one, it's a prohibition as long as you have that restraining order. But they also have the new language in there about they suspend it and not revoke it. That was put under the different act. This bill did something in 2 different acts, which they do in a lot of times. But that was basically everything. Okay. And you know, it's so new. The governor just signed it a little while ago, which was, I think,
Monday.
Yeah, this week. Yeah. And so I pulled it up because I wanted to see what it was. I went to the statutes. They don't even have it printed in the statutes yet. I had to go to the actual bill. And yeah, he just signed it, and it's both of them though do list an effective date of January 1 of 2019. So nothing changes between now and then. Now, warning, fair warning, a firearms dealer can have any of his own rules he wants to have. If he wants you all to wait 2 weeks to get your gun, he could do that. Don't be surprised. You may get some FFL holders that say, well, the law has changed and you're going to just wait 3 days for everything. I mean, you can point out the law to him, but you can't, all you can do is not shop from him. He can say, well, this is my rule now. You know, just like some of them are saying you got to be 21 to buy a long gun instead of 18. They can have their own rules. So don't be surprised if your gun dealer somehow thinks that it went into effect immediately because it's in the press, but legally it doesn't go into effect till January 1.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, one thing. Sure. On the 72-hour wait,
Yes.
right now as it stands, your wait period starts when you make the agreement to purchase the weapon.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. The only
You make
thing,
the agreement.
right, the only thing that's changed is how long you got to wait.
Okay.
So when I get the email saying, I'd like to buy this is coming from Buzz, that starts the clock.
Correct.
I don't have to, and I can put in the background check then. I don't have to wait until they file the 4473
No.
before I put in the background check.
Well, then
My
it's your
ATF
background
agent's
check.
not going to bust my stones for...
That has not changed anything. And you're right, if people order guns, it usually takes more than a day to get them. But it's the ones that you're dealing over the counter where they have it right there, it'll make an impact.
Okay, the other question I had was when somebody says, you know, that I think they're a danger to themselves and others, please come, take the guns. How you told us how long you have to.
In the emergency one, there's supposed to be another hearing with the person there within 7 days. In the 6-month one, you can have a hearing within 14 days.
Okay, and is that permanent in
What
the
do you mean?
emergency one, or do you get a?
No, the emergency one can request to convert it into the 6 months after you have that hard hearing.
Okay, but after you have the hard hearing, is it written in stone? Or is
Unless you petition, like I said, you got one right to go in and vacate it.
Okay.
But it doesn't get into that 6 months until you have the hearing with both sides there. They can't behind your back get 6 months off from you.
Okay.
Behind your back, there must be another hearing within 14 days. So technically, they can take them away for 2 weeks on you. If you get served and don't show up, they're going to have that second hearing within 14 days. But the key is they got to serve you with a notice to come to court.
Anybody else? Thanks, Phil.
Oh, there was some more, I'm sorry.
Okay, Paula?
I'd like to know who's going to make sure that what's in the bill goes into the statute as intended.
Well, there's no such thing as intended. It'll go in word for word as it's written, and then the courts will determine the intent later. Yes,
So they
sir.
don't get to-
What was those bill numbers, those House bill numbers?
The House bill is for the firearms restraining order. If you want to go to the the State of Illinois General Assembly website, and you look under Public Acts, it is Public Act 100-607. The Public Act for the waiting period is Public Act 100-606, and how they get those numbers is the order that the governor signed them in. So that was the 606th law and the 607th law that were signed this term of the legislature.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil, appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to just say a quick little word about that. I've been getting many emails from our members that are very unhappy. We sold them down the river and everything with this bill. The bill that originally came out was draconian. Anybody could pretty much tell anybody they couldn't have a gun. And I could say somebody 10 states over almost couldn't have a gun. It was that bad. We worked very, very hard to get it as watered down as it is. And we're not happy with it. The anti-gunners aren't happy with it. Nobody's happy with it. But it allowed them to have a bill that they could get signed. It allowed us to support the governor signing something like this. He is a very pro-gun governor. And the other bills, he did not sign. This one, he had to. It was a veto-proof majority. They were going to get something that was signed, and if Rauner didn't do it, Pritzker, if he gets in, he would have signed it in January. So we made some lemonade that didn't taste very good, but at least we made some lemonade out of lemons on it. And I've emailed back to several of the people, and I explained the situation, and now they understand it. And we're probably going to have to get something written out to say that we made the best of a very, very bad situation. I've talked to Gun Saves Lives and Illinois Carry and everything about it, and we just made the best of a bad situation. And we all just sort of have to bite our tongue, I guess, and live with it. That's it.
Is there
I think
is there a sunset clause on this at all?
No.
No. Why? It's going to be a hard law. I think something that bothers me about this, and I see it on our websites and a lot of places. I want to put this gently. Most people have no idea what they're talking about. Winston Churchill once said, "You don't negotiate with a tiger while he has your head in his mouth." That's the state of Illinois, okay? They've got our head in their mouth. So when I see on social media, ISRA sold us out, does anybody honestly think that the Illinois State Rifle Association does not look out and try and do the best possible thing for not just our members, but for gun owners in the state of Illinois, period? And this thing about, oh, they signed off on this thing, so they sold us out. That's crap. You just don't understand what's going on in the background. I've been down there. It's chaotic. Anybody who's at Margle will tell you that, except they're up fishing right now in their cabin. But you ask anybody that, Mark Batnick, any of those people, and they will tell you that it's like they're trying to swim with an anchor. So if the ISRA endorses something or has input on something, or any other group for that matter, it's because they're doing the best they can do. Plan B is you're going to lose it completely. If you don't have any input, they'll get everything they want. So that's kind of I hate to be on my soapbox, but that's my thing. They just work it the best they can do it, and it's that simple. Does anybody else have any good and welfare, anything? Does somebody else want to say something? I can't remember. Gretchen did, right? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm going to hear that.
So last month, I told you all that I was planning a motorcycle ride down to Monee, and we are still doing that, but we had to cancel the shooting portion of the program. The person who has the shooting range does not have the proper permits to be able to do that. So we're still going to do the motorcycle ride. We're still going to have lunch at his place. We just can't shoot once we get there. So I do have a few invitations if anybody would like a hard copy invitation. If you'd like to come give me your cell phone number, I can text it to you. I have it in my phone if you prefer that, or you can just look on Facebook or Eventbrite. So let me know if you need any more information.
And you don't have to ride a motorcycle, but you know, Gretchen covers the Plainfield district, but it's one more seat in the county board that's pro Second Amendment. So come on out and have lunch with us. Who asked me about the no business card? Somebody asked me last month about those cards that we had. Who was it? Here they are. So if you're not familiar with them, when we first gave them out, basically what they're like business cards, and on the back it shows a little no gun sign, and then it says it equals no money. So we've got them. A lot of people use them, and they go to a restaurant, see the sign, and walk in and hand them a card and walk out. So that's it. Anybody else before we get into our story? Yes.
I haven't seen the website lately, but is there a list of attorneys that can defend these new laws?
There is a list. David has a list of them.
I'm actually meeting with him Friday, and
I think it'd be great to put it up there, just you know, because as soon as you know, where do you go if you get served with this stuff? Ex-girlfriend gets pissed off at you, I'm going up. Sorry, your website, say what next?
Yeah, it's a good point. We've talked about that very thing. Anybody else? Okay, yep. Terry, I knew there was somebody else on that side.
Yeah, it's held to be old.
What?
Sunday at the range is the first Springfield match of the year. It's supposed to be for Springfield Armory Pistols. It's a 50-round match, and we shoot 10 rounds, 15 rounds, 15 rounds, and 10 rounds. But the unique thing about it is you drop from a holster and you do a magazine change. Everyone has to do that. Now, in the past, I've told you if you just took a little piece of tape and wrote Springfield on it and stuck it on the side of your Glock, you can shoot. You don't even have to do that now. You can just come and shoot it with your Glock. We want to see if we can bolster the membership up. And if you like the match, you may buy a Springfield. It's meant that way so we can shoot 1911s and XDs, high-capacity guns together. 1911 standard magazine, 7 rounds. Well, if you got to shoot 15, magazine change, 1 in the chamber, that's 15. So, I'd like to see anybody come. You do not have to be a range member. However, if you're not an ISRA member, we'll make you pay more. But most people here are ISRA members, so we won't charge you anything extra. I just wanted to get that out and try to get the membership up a little. It's not increasing like the other matches that we hold down there, so I wanted to say a little bit about it. Thank you, Dave.
What's the fee?
What?
What's the fee for range member?
$20. Same as a Glock match.
And don't forget, I have a book. You could become a member tonight if you want.
Yes. I think I have one out in the truck, too.
So, now finally our speaker. I would say that being that we are essentially, for the most part, north of I-80, although technically we're not completely, but for a county that's north of I-80, I find it extremely refreshing that we have a state's attorney who actually believes in the Second Amendment. And Jim Glasgow, for as long as I've known him, as long as you've been a state's attorney, you've always been pro-Second Amendment. You were for concealed carry before there was concealed carry, and you've always been strong about that. So Jim is here this evening. He's not up for re-election. He's here because he's not, because he really believes in this, and he's a big supporter of the ISRA and gun rights in general. So let's hear it for Jim Glasgow.
One of the things I was talking to Gretchen Fritz about in the parking lot after a county board meeting was the whole issue of gun safety. And that's why I love the slogan for the State Rifle Association, where you education, safety training, and support for Illinois firearms owners. And I think if the NRA would get a little more aggressive on that safety issue, not give up anything else that they stand for, but just get real hard on that safety issue, a lot of people that view them with suspicion might change their minds. We've got a horribly tragic case that happened here in Will County, and I can't get into too much detail because some of you might be jurors, but a decent man owning some guns didn't secure them, and one of them was loaded, and a little child shot another little child. Now the family is tragically destroyed. That man's life is destroyed. He knows what he's responsible for. He's a decent human being, and he'll have to live with that the rest of his life. And all he had to do is secure those weapons. Now, I'm 67 years old, and I just got my first FOID card. Can I get some applause? My good friend Ken Gray, who's my chief deputy, has been around guns. His dad was a general in the Army. He's been around guns since he was a little kid. He finally convinced me to go to the range, post Drew Peterson trying to kill me. And the first time I went, it was overwhelming. The responsibility you have. All I kept thinking is downrange, downrange. Don't point the gun. And thinking about it as I'm shooting this powerful thing, how could anybody do that and then be shot at and function? It's just an incredible responsibility that we have with using a gun. But it's also, I know you see people saying I'm pro-First Amendment, or I'm pro-Fourth Amendment, or I'm pro-Fifth Amendment. It's an amendment. It's part of the Constitution. It's there. And I think the language is plain, and if you look at the founding fathers and the comments they made about it, it's pretty clear. The problems in our society are not from law-abiding people like the people in this room that own weapons. All of my violence in Will County is from gangbangers, 95% plus. Every once in a while, we'll have a domestic issue, but that's really rare. And right now, we've got an uptick in shootings, and I'm going to be meeting on Friday with the 5 largest municipalities in the county. We're working on a real aggressive initiative to really go after that increase in gang shootings. And those guns are all illegally used, illegally owned. That has nothing to do with the law-abiding citizen having the right to own a firearm to defend himself and his family. And so, you know, when the Peterson thing hit, I'm the luckiest guy in this room. I've had so many divine interventions in my life. I mean, I've stepped my neck out a lot because I'm a knucklehead, but, you know, Peterson made a comment on the tapes, the overheard tapes that the FBI was able to make in prison, where he said, he's bragging to Antonio Smith, our informant. He says, if I was out in the street right now, I'd take care of him myself. And I was going to kill him back in '07, but I couldn't shake the media and the police. And when I heard that, being an attorney, fear was secondary. First I'm thinking, his entrapment defense is gone. He's been thinking about killing me since '07. So, but the bottom line is I had police protection on my house for a few months, round the clock, because I have a family that I love dearly, and you know, they could easily be collateral damage. And this is a guy who killed 2 of his wives and wouldn't hesitate to kill me. But again, that's not something that, you know, I can think about, or I wouldn't be able to do my job. But the concealed carry aspect, the only time we really have problems with concealed carry is where a guy has a few too many drinks, he's in his car, and, you know, officer, I have concealed carry, and I'm .016. You don't lose your concealed carry permit over that. You get two bites of the apple with that, and that's the one thing, though, we all know in this room, you don't want to be handling your firearm when you're intoxicated. That's a recipe for disaster. No matter how skilled you are, you just don't have your coordination the way you want it to be. And like I said, I'll never forget that first day. Okay, I'll never forget that first day at the firearm range where I realized what an incredible responsibility that we do have. We saw on the news recently some Chicago officers had to shoot an individual with a gun, and I've had the honor since 1992 of reviewing all of the use of deadly force with a firearm by law enforcement in Will County, and we probably had maybe 50 incidents. The ones that I don't go to trial on, where the individual is deceased and there's no one to charge, then I write a letter. And it is amazing, nearly every letter that I've written, I point out that he could have fired here, could have fired here, and he waited till here. The officers show restraint almost across the board. They hesitate to kill. That's not what you get from the news media, is it? No. I mean, those knuckleheads need to go out in the field and face what the police officers face on a daily basis. And just like that, we saw it on the video, the guy's reaching for the gun. If they wait for that gun to clear, what happens? Then it's anybody's game. And those bullets travel, it's a 9mm, 1,200 feet a second, and it's like that. The other thing is when they're running, they always say, well, he never pointed it at anybody. If the gun is, Jeff Chudwin's a good friend of mine, and I remember he teaches a class, and he was telling me, you know, one of the things I used to tell the rookies, I'd have a rookie stand up and they said, take your hand and form a gun and point it at me. And he says, bang, you're dead. If I've got a gun down here and you're pointing your gun at me, I can fire and that bullet's through you before your brain even knows what happened. So that's what the police know. And these reporters should go through training and learn that. You don't have the ability to wait. And when they're running away, they can do this, or they can spin around. They don't have to wait for that to be shot. And so, anyway, this has been, like I said, a true honor to be able to do this. We had a case right after Ferguson, when all the Ferguson stuff was hitting, where a Joliet officer had to shoot an individual fleeing He shot him twice in the back. What are all the facts? The guy had just done an armed robbery on a woman and told her that if she said anything, he'd kill her. The officer catches him, has him on the squad car hood, and he takes off running. So he chases him, and as he sees him go like this, he fires 2 shots. But again, this is a situation where, you know, with all the misinformation out there from Ferguson and the other things that were going on, but I felt very proud to be able to do that. That officer acted to protect our community, and he acted properly. And I remember we were on the elevator, and he said, man, he says, you know, the media, what are they gonna, I said, listen, if the media comes, I'll talk to them. That's my job. And, you know, I make the legal determination on this. The facts are clear. And you know what was neat there? We had an independent witness. Somebody was on a lunch break from the Jacob Henry mansion, and he was out having a cigarette, and he was in a position to see the gun clear his belt. The officer only saw this, the movement, but this kid saw the gun come completely out. And then after he was shot, he goes like this, which is unfortunately a classic. They always think you toss the gun and it's not mine anymore. And speaking of tossing the gun, did anybody see the video of the judge with the top coat? Yeah. In the courthouse? Now, we all chuckle, but it's a good friend of mine, Joe Claps. He was a former chief of the criminal division for the Attorney General's office. He's been a felony judge for 20 plus years. He's tried a number of death penalty cases in his career. You know, had the worst of the worst in front of him. You know, guys that would kill you and go out for pizza. And you know, it's tragic that that happened. Now, let's look at it from a factual standpoint. I don't think I would have charged that case. What we have is a grainy video. We've got an object hitting the ground. You can't see on the video what it is. Now, they say that there's a couple people that say they saw it was a gun. Well, as a prosecutor, I have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did something. I got to prove that's a real gun. I got to prove that's a real gun that works in order to sustain my case. They can't do that. They don't have the gun. So then you have the conflict between the FOID statute and concealed carry. Under the FOID law, I can have a gun in my fixed place of business. And then they say in the concealed carry they ban certain places. But so there's, you know, we're talking about Springfield and the knucklehead stuff that goes on. The inconsistencies in our legislation drive Phil and I nuts on a regular basis, trying to reconcile them and figure out what did the legislature mean. So, in fact, I called Joe on the way down here. I just, he's an Italian, and his family owned an Italian bakery in Chicago for 50 years. And he always used to bring cannolis down when he was with the Attorney General's office. And I couldn't resist calling him up and say, hey, Joe, leave the gun, take the cannoli. But I talked to Margot McDermott about a bill that she had pending recently that would have allowed all judges to carry, all elected state's attorneys and all assistant state's attorneys with the consent of the state's attorney. And I had talked to her about, I've done a lot of legislation in my career. You know, what you have to do, it's just like with this law that just went through where the ISRA supported it as far as people that would be a danger to themselves. If you don't get in the mix on those kind of laws, you can get a runaway law that is so ridiculous. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses and negotiate the best deal you can get. When I was trying Peterson, I had to put something in my forfeiture by wrongdoing law that was absolutely antithetical to the whole concept, just to get it through. But then the Supreme Court came to my rescue with a court decision that said, no, that wasn't going to be required. So Margot's bill, I said I'd support it, I'd testify for her. I think I'd be in the best position to do that based on the things I've been through in my career. I've had a number of people threaten to kill me. I had a guy break out the front window of my building across from the Rialto, and I wasn't there at the time. And then he was burglarizing cars. He got caught. When the police questioned him, he said, if Glasgow had been there, I'd have caved his head in with this hammer. Well, we sent him to prison, but again, he's obviously going to get out, and he's not a little bit off mentally. Okay, I don't even know this guy. He's not even from Joliet, and I don't know that we ever prosecuted him. So there's a lot of crazy people out there, and judges and prosecutors garner the ire of people we deal with. But I was talking to Margot and of course Ed, everybody knows Ed, that maybe we should focus a little more, because her bill, I think, is dead. But I'm the only elected official in the state of Illinois that has the ability to hire anyone in this room, swear you in as a special state's attorney investigator, and hand you a gun. But I can't have a gun. Does that make any sense? No, I'm seriously. It's almost stupid, because why are you letting me arm people when I'm not skilled with firearms? You know, I mean, every other law enforcement agency, the person at the top is armed. Okay? So I think I'm going to, you know, the next session I'm going to sit down with Margot and see if we can craft something where we just start out. There's probably about 96 elected state's attorneys in the state of Illinois. So that's a smaller number. When you're talking about all the judges, all the states, assistant state, you're talking about thousands of people. Well, that's hard for the legislature to swallow right off the bat. But I think if we go in there with what I just said to you about the power that I have, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm not asking them to take it away from me, but let's make it, you know, full bore. And even if it's a situation where they just give me the discretion to do it, and then if I do, then I got to take a 40-hour course and become completely versed in what I'm going to be doing with that handgun or whatever gun that might be. And then that makes a lot more sense when I'm arming other people. Also, the floodgates aren't open. I've always gone in and gotten little baby steps first with legislation that I've done, and then you come back later. In 1999, somebody set a cat on fire in Joliet. I was appalled. I love animals. Okay, I got 3 dogs. I got a Great Dane, 150-pound Great Dane, a 60-pound Border Collie, and a 10-pound Chinese Crested Hairless. Then my wife snuck home one night, all of a sudden under her coat, and we're like, "What are you doing? We already got 2 dogs." And I never thought I'd like a little dog. That dog has got more guts and courage than the other 2 combined. I mean, she jumps up on the ottoman and goes after the Great Dane. His head is bigger than she is. But anyway, every night when I go home, the 3 dogs are in the laundry room greeting me, and that's worth its weight in gold. So going back to the cat set on fire, that's cruelty, that's torture, and I thought, this guy's really dangerous. Anybody who would do that and take pleasure in that is potential mass murder. I did some research, the FBI statistics back that up. So I went to Springfield in 1999, and they're laughing at me. They said, "You want a felony for abusing an animal?" Because back then, that setting the cat on fire was a Class B misdemeanor, criminal damage to property only. So when I explained to them the FBI angle, that's where I started to get some traction. And also the fact that I put in a mandatory psychiatric evaluation upon conviction. So that a shrink had to go and look at this guy and give a report to the judge so he could order whatever treatment is necessary to try to manage this guy's aberrant behavior. And now, and at that point it was a Class 4 felony. It's now been bumped up to a Class 3, and now we have aggravated cruelty with it, which is a Class 4. And then, you know, and that also has the psychiatric evaluation that I put in back in '99. And for what it's worth, any animal lovers in the room, our statutes are really ahead of the most places in this country. We just had the ASPCA here for a 2-day conference to teach law enforcement and all the animal control agencies about animal cruelty aspects and how to investigate and collect evidence. And they're going to come back next year and do a 3rd day. It was really well received. And I'm establishing the Extraordinary League of Canines here in Will County, which would basically be an organization starting with the grassroots, you know, anti-cruelty societies and the humane societies, the animal enforcement people. We have about 54 canines with the police departments, and recently I purchased 6 dogs for 6 different communities that didn't have them because of the opioid crisis. It's critical. Those dogs serve a huge purpose. We're kind of in a different, am I getting too far off the gun thing here? Sorry. But I think it's important you know this, you know, because how many in this room know a young person or either a neighbor or an uncle or whatever, or a distant family member that's had problems with drugs? I mean, it's all over. It's rare that you find somebody that doesn't know somebody that that has been touched by the tragedy. Just about 12 years ago, we were having single-digit overdoses. We're up to 100 now a year, and that's just not acceptable. And it was fueled by OxyContin and some of the other, painkillers that the pharmaceutical companies made billions of dollars on. So, anyway, the League of Extraordinary Kings, I think, has tremendous potential on so many different levels, and it'll help protect the defenseless animals that make our lives so happy when we go home with the weight of the world on us. I bought my first handgun. Ken can tell you I studied like crazy. Maybe I didn't. I'm waiting for Jeff Chudwin to tell me whether I made the right decision or not. But I bought an FNS 9C, and it has the two smaller clips are 12, and then the larger one is 17. And Ken told me you don't want just 6. So, but it seems like it's a good balance of a lot of different features. I wanted a safety on there because I'm not skilled. I want to make sure that safety's on, until I'm, ready to use it. Some of the more skilled people would say, no, I need to be quicker, and well, I'm just not going to be quicker. I'm going to be safer, and then hopefully it'll be there. And I also bought a safe. I just want to stress that. I went to Home Depot and bought a 1.23 cubic foot Sentry safe with the push buttons on the front, and the ammunition, the gun, everything's in there, and that's where it's going to stay. I have a 17-year-old at home, and he's not a malicious kid or anything, but kids are curious, and I know just from handling the gun as much as I have, I still don't feel comfortable. But, it's not like it's rocket science or anything, but you really got to know to be comfortable with what you're doing with all the different little things on that thing, because if you make a mistake, it might be the worst mistake you make in your life. So I just wanted to come out here and just say hi to you guys, and if you have any issues, I'm more than happy. Anytime you have legislation, I'd be glad to talk to you about it and even testify if necessary. And it's important that this is one thing that is I don't understand. There's so much proselytizing that goes on every time there's a tragedy. There was a shooting in Texas where a guy went in and killed, I think, 30 people in a church. This guy was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. If anybody had been paying attention and doing their damn job, he never would have been in a position to do that. And you look at every one of these tragedies, the one in Florida recently, where the individual got the gun from his father. Dad, lock up the gun, okay? You don't see law-abiding citizens for the most part doing these things. There's always a break in the chain, and gun safety would prevent probably 50 to 60% of these things from ever happening. The other thing is, all of us being alert to what we're seeing in our surroundings. That San Bernardino thing, how many red flags did those people have to put up? And everybody ignored them, and nobody wanted to be, criticized for, being prejudiced or anything. That has nothing to do with it. This is about the lives of innocent people, and we got to put all this political correctness to the side. You can be. Everything has got to be distilled down to some ridiculous accusation instead of stepping back and rationally looking at what happened. And I want to try to do something here in Will County. I'm working with the U.S. Attorney's Office right now to get 2 of my assistant state's attorneys cross-designated for this gang initiative, because the federal laws are a lot tougher than ours, and so in some cases we may be able to get sentences 2 or 3 times what I could get at the state level, plus they'll go to a prison outside of Illinois, which really limits their ability to do anything. And I work with ATF now, I work with the FBI, Postal Service, Secret Service, but we're never able to get federal charges for them. Now we will be able to, in certain cases, be able to do that, which will encourage the federal agents to be more aggressive. And not that they aren't already, but they never get that prize that they normally get when they're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is understaffed. They can't handle any additional work other than what they're dealing with in Chicago. I mean, in 2016 there was 800 murders, And you know how many were solved? 15%. Now, here, we've had some shootings recently that were gang-related, but for the most part, we're north of 90% on solving murders in Will County. And we want to keep it that way. But if I eliminated gang violence from this county, it would be one of the safest counties in the country. We don't have an out-of-control problem like they do in Chicago. And we know who the most violent offenders are, and that's going to be the target of our new initiative. And I think working with John, does anybody know John Lausch, the new U.S. Attorney? Because he went to Joliet Catholic, graduated I think 87, 88. So we've got a Joliet in the U.S. Attorney's office. That's a first, at least in my prosecution history. And so his parents still live in Joliet. So not that he's going to do anything he wouldn't normally do, but he's certainly got a soft place in his heart for Will County. And I expect great things in our partnership with him. So yeah, I don't want to go too far here, but the bottom line is, if people would just look at the facts for what they really are, and not try to divert off into some false accusation, which it seems like there's no elected officials in Chicago that ever say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not what happened." Thankfully, the police chief in Chicago now, he's African American. He's standing by his guys. When the facts back them, he doesn't hesitate to get in front of the camera. And I'm hoping that that'll carry some weight in the minority community. He's not covering anything up. He's black, and he's judging these officers based on what the facts show that they did. And again, I'll just reiterate: here in Will County, these officers put their lives in jeopardy many times by not pulling the trigger. I'll just finish with Adelaide Connolly. She responded to a young man under the influence of drugs, threatening the family with a knife. She and her partner arrive. The guy charges at her with the knife. She's able to avoid him. She doesn't shoot him. He comes at her and he swipes at her face and misses. She doesn't shoot him. Both times, totally justified under the law. He's coming at her with a deadly weapon. He slices her across the face and she shoots him. And I said, "Adelaide, you only fired one shot." She said, "I thought I emptied my gun." Now, that's the thing these reporters don't understand. When you're in a life and death situation like that, everything's different. Your adrenaline, your heart rate, everything. You don't see the things you do when you're calm. And you don't remember the things you do when you're calm. So she fired one shot and he didn't go down. And thankfully he wasn't able to stab anybody else. He ran out in the driveway, collapsed, and then subsequently passed away. But I always use that as an example. She thought she was doing what she needed to do to protect herself and everyone else in the house, but only one shot went off. So again, keep that in mind when you're thinking about the police. They put their lives on the line every day. And every time I see these tinted windows that you can't see inside the car, I mean, that's illegal. And we're going to start focusing on that, because, look, I pull up alongside of a car and I look at a black window, people recognize me. I don't know if there's a gun on the other side of that window. And that's just wrong. And right now that's only a petty offense, but I'm going to talk to Margot McDermott about some legislation. If you wear a mask and you use a gun, that's an enhancement. If you wear body armor with a gun, that's an enhancement. Well, if you're in a car with a gun that I can't see inside, that should be the same kind of an enhancement. It's just as dangerous. When the police pull that car over, they're walking up to total uncertainty. And their lives are completely at risk. So, and there's no safe way to approach when it's like that. So I prosecuted the shooting of Tim Simonson when he was a Crest Hill police officer. And there was a case where he opened the trunk. He couldn't see through the trunk. He opened the trunk and boom. And you talk about divine intervention, that was some kind of a tube-loading rifle. The second shell stood up and blocked the next one because he was going to kill the other officer and the civilian witness who was there, and God intervened. And then he took off running, and then the other officer was able to shoot him in the leg, and then we had a trial. And then wonderful George Ryan took them both off death row, which is another tragedy. So I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody has. Yes?
Did you have a card?
You know what? We moved buildings, and I'm in the process of getting some. You got any cards, Ken?
I do.
All right. My chief deputy will give you his card, and you can reach me through him.
Are you
Yes.
still doing, speaking to people about gang violence, and they've been doing through the years?
Yes.
Still doing that?
Yes, in fact, we just had a meeting today about re-editing our gang book, because the gangs have completely changed. I tried my first gang case in 1985. A Latin King fired 2 shotgun blasts into a van full of 2 Sixers. And that's basically when gangs first started to show their ugly head here, 1985. So that's not that long ago. But you know, the thing started to spiral out of control. When I first came in 1992, my predecessor hadn't done anything about gangs, and they went from like 50 shootings a year to 250. And so I inherited that. I did an administrative order in the courthouse that stopped the fights in the courthouse, and then we did an undercover operation where we spent 6 months, you know, buying guns and drugs and whatever else from certain gangbangers. We suppressed the indictments and swept them off in 2 days. And on December 7th of 1993, we did that sweep. We had 297 gang shootings for the year. The next 3 months, we had 0. And it went down to 180 the next year, 140 the next year, 120. So we kept the pedal to the metal, and that's the same thing we want to do again this time. You know, these, like I said, the gangs here are not like in they do communicate with Chicago, but they're not as organized. They're not as pernicious. We can get people to break ranks and squeal, which they can't do in Chicago. That's why the solve rate was only 15% in 2016, because everybody knows if you talk, you won't make it to trial. There are so many violent gangbangers up there that these people live in dire fear of ever cooperating with the police, that either they or their family members will be killed if they do. And I'm very fortunate here. We have enough money from seizures that we've been able to relocate witnesses when that rare occurrence happens here, where there is a threat of our eyewitness being killed. We have a couple cases pending right now where we've done that. And I remember one case in particular, our eyewitness weighed about 400 pounds, and some idiot tried to kill him with a .22. And shot him 8 times. And I went to visit him in the Silver Cross Hospital. He's sitting there like this, and he just had a bunch of wounds that they took the bullets out. He's going to be okay. And his wife drove a hard bargain on the relocation. You know, she wanted rent paid, she wanted a job, we got it all done. And he testified. We got the guy convicted of murder, sent him away. And they've been gone for about 5 years, and they're safe. Nothing's happened to them. So that, you know, the relocation can work. They cooperate. They're not stupid and tell people where they're at. And you know, we've got that to show other potential witnesses that we can help you, we can take care of you, and to get the bad guys. The thing that's scary is, you know how they hold the gun like this? Try shooting it accurately that way. Well, thankfully they don't. You know, probably about 90% of the shootings, they don't hit anything. I was coming back from All Nations Church on the south end. They gave us an award for our Child Ad Center, and I took Mike Riley, he's one of my investigators. They used to call him 240 Riley. That was his badge number. Everybody said, "Where's 240?" He was so famous, he could find anybody. Well, now he's retired, but he's working for me now, and he serves paper, and there's nobody he can't find. But we're driving back, and we get back to the courthouse, and we hear he got something on over his radio. Right where we had just driven, just 10 minutes before, 20 shots were exchanged, 2 idiot gangbangers, one in the street and one in the backyard. So we could have driven right in the middle of that. And Mike says to me, "Boy, Jim, that's a good thing that didn't happen when we were there, because I'd have jumped out of the car and gone after him and left you alone." Thanks, Mike. That's why Dave's here with me. So, but what I'm saying is, you know, they don't care where they're at. You know, they used to stay in certain areas. Now, anywhere they see each other, they just open up. We have one case pending where a guy got shot. There was about 30 shots exchanged. We only caught him because he got shot and he couldn't flee. But he won't tell us who the other guy is. He knows who the other guy is, but he won't tell us. But we're working on a methodology where all of the police departments in Will County can share their gang intelligence and work together. They can't do that right now, across city lines or whatever. We have a major crimes task force, and we're going to try to use that same philosophy with the gang prosecution. And I've dedicated one of my senior felony attorneys to work directly with this operation and not get tied up in trial. So she will be available at all times, and she's got close to a photographic memory. It scares me when she starts talking about, you know, Willie the Hat and Billy the Bob and all these other crazy nicknames that they have. And those are nice variations, by the way. But they've got gangs, Squad Mafia, Hilltop Shorties, Sick Maid, and each gang might have like a half a dozen guys in it now. They've splintered, which actually is to our advantage, because when they're organized and they have a strong leader who keeps control, it's harder to deal with them and harder to, you know, make arrests and do undercover buys. But when they're all splintered and they don't know what they're doing, it's a lot easier for us to outsmart them. So I'm looking forward to the next year and seeing how effective we can be, because no matter where you live, they don't just stay in Joliet. They you know, they're constantly going back and forth to Kankakee, you know, Bolingbrook, Romeoville, Lockport also have issues, and obviously Will County. There's a lot of Will County areas that abut those villages and Joliet, where there's some solid gang activity. So Mike Kelly's committed to working with us on this. So we're really optimistic, and this partnership with the U.S. Attorney could be just spectacular. So thanks for having me out. I really appreciate it, and you know, I'd like to come back again and you know, tell you some more war stories.
Jim, do you know why gangbangers shoot this way? No. That's how the gun came out of the box.
And now you know the rest of the story.
They say they don't get training, yeah. You guys want to pass the hat around? Anybody else have anything, any last minute good and welfare before we draw and see if you're going to give away an AR? Maybe you don't? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about insurance, concealed carry insurance. People take it out even if it's the minimum amount, but will have something to back them, like the USCCA. And I compared both the USCCA and NRA. USCCA came up less expensive.